Today you are going to meet visionary women and men who are reimagining and re-engineering what teaching and learning can be in a digital world. These are leaders who are not just thinking about transforming education, they are making it happen. You will see promising new technologies and services that are changing what it means to go to school. And you will hear candid and diverse views on the challenges facing education and the role that technology is playing in the search for solutions. But you are not here just to listen. We will look to you to teach as well as to learn. It is our goal that at day's end you will leave not just knowing more about education and technology, but that you will be energized by new ideas and opportunities. But before we get started, I'd like to recognize the people and organizations that have made today possible. This year, HigherEdTECH has 2 new partners that have been invaluable in assembling this day. Inside Higher Education is our exclusive media partner. Doug Letterman, the editor and co-founder, is a leading voice for innovation in higher education. He has also been an astute and generous advisor. Doug? There's Doug, and you'll be hearing from him later. And of course, I've got to say that Inside Higher Ed has to be on your must-read reading list. So don't forget that. Whiteboard Advisors is our new production partner. I'd like to recognize Ben Wallerstein, John Bailey, and Jenna Talbot. Come on, don't be shy. These people were really critical in putting this all together. Today's program is the result of a very fruitful relationship and collaboration between our organizations. And HigherEdTECH would not be taking place today without the generous support of the Lumina Foundation and the sponsorship of more than 20 businesses and companies. Our thanks for each of them for investing in HigherEdTECH 2013. Yay. You know how important that is. Finally, my thanks to the HigherEdTECH Living in Digital Times team, who will be front and center today. The names are on the screen, and I hope you'll get a chance to meet them today. And lastly, just a few housekeeping details. Check your conference badge for the program guide and some goodies, and I hope you will wear this button today and engage in the social media. There are no breaks, so please leave as you need to and just come back soon. You will not starve. Thanks to McGraw-Hill, there are plenty of bagels and coffee. Kaplan Higher Education Group is sponsoring lunch. And Dell, Intel, and Promethean are sponsoring a networking reception. This is something we heard from previous attendees that you really wanted, and it will be at 5:30 and in the adjacent room. So we hope that you will join us there. And please, please, tweet about HigherEdTECH to friends and colleagues around the world. We hope you will do that. So thank you for joining us for HigherEdTECH 2013. Now we're going to turn to what we think is the best show in Vegas, and it's my pleasure to turn the podium over to Casey Green. You'll see his name more formally as Kenneth C. Green, founding director of the Campus Computing Project and one of the visionary leaders in education and technology.
Hi, good morning. As Jinny said, I'm Casey Green. I'm the founding director of Campus Computing. Campus Computing is the largest continuing study of IT in American higher education. Our goal is to displace opinion and epiphany with data about the conversation of technology in colleges and universities. I'd like to welcome you. I'd like to just quick add on to the comment about tweeting like your mother told you. Tweet nice things if you're going to tweet nice things, if you're going to tweet about HigherEdTECH. It's my pleasure, it's my great honor to introduce Walt Mossberg, who will sort of open our conference today. Mr. Mossberg, for 2 decades, has been the voice of civilians in a world of technology at the Wall Street Journal. A former diplomatic correspondent, at least the bio that I read in the New Yorker profile some years ago, said he actually had to argue with his editors to get the column launched, the personal technology column. It has been a great boon, I think, to many of us who look for a voice of the civilian in a world of techies trying to navigate an increasingly complex, yet an important part of our personal lives and our professional lives as well. By his own admission, when he was here 2 years ago, Mr. Mossberg said, I don't know much about higher education. I'm on the board of Brandeis, but I don't do this for a living. Although, as we were talking earlier, he said that he's had quite an education recently as service on a task force at Brandeis. Just a personal aside, for those of you who are in higher ed, his column yesterday is a cautionary tale about upgrading to Windows, the newest edition. In that, at least from the data we've got from campus computing, usually the refresh rate for faculty and administrative systems on college campuses is about 4 to 5 years. And Mr. Mossberg seemed to suggest, unless you've got a recent box, you probably don't want to go there. So my pleasure to introduce Walt Mossberg. Is that a fair introduction? It's early, we're waiting for the second cup of coffee. So Walt's going to talk for a little bit and share with us some of his perspectives. He and I will talk for a little bit. We're going to try to get some questions. He's got to leave quickly, and then we're going to bring up a panel to kind of parse some of the stuff that Mr. Mossberg has said. All yours.
Thanks. Casey did leave out any reference to my Academy Awards. I was a little annoyed by that. I have won no Academy Awards, but I watched the Academy Awards. I don't know if that counts. And I saw Lincoln. Does that? I don't know if that counts for anything. So I'm going to say again what I said 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when I was here, I was primarily talking about what was then a fairly new phenomenon, the rise of the tablet and the rise of the digital books on tablets and e-readers. The irony, this is not a higher ed subject. Well, it is, I guess. The irony is that tablets are not only now expected to outship laptops this year, which is quite, if you're a guy like me who covers technology, that's an amazing statement, considering that nobody even, or hardly anybody owned a tablet who didn't work in a warehouse 3 years ago. And they're also actually slowly killing off the dedicated e-reader. And he's right, I said I'm not a higher ed expert. I have already met a bunch of people here who will be on the program later who who forgot more this morning than I know about this subject. But I have some strong feelings about it. I do know about the technology, and as was mentioned, I just wrapped up a term of 4 years as a trustee at Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts, which is considered, one of the elite private higher ed schools. And I was on the board and we went through the financial meltdown and all of those issues that colleges had to face, and also more interestingly spent the last better part of the last 6 or 9 months working on a task force on what we called flexible learning, and really wrestling with, I think, a bunch of the core issues that go to the question of higher ed tech and online education, and how does it fit in. I also had the great pleasure, I run a conference called the D Conference, the All Things Digital Conference, with my partner Kara Swisher, and we have all kinds of leaders in tech and related fields, and I got the chance this past June to interview. We do cold interviews. We don't do big panels. We don't allow prepared speeches. We don't allow PowerPoint, even for Bill Gates when he speaks, even though he owns PowerPoint, he can't use it. Listen, I once had to talk Steve Jobs out of using 52 slides after I had told him he couldn't use any. And none of his people would tell him he couldn't use the slides, so I had to go back and tell him he couldn't use the slides. And he was okay with it. So I got to interview John Hennessy, the president of Stanford. They've been very active, as you know, in this. and Salman Khan, who is one of the real pioneers, and it was quite an interesting session. So let me start by saying something that I believe personally, and this is not, I'm not here representing the views of the Wall Street Journal or News Corporation, but it is my point of view that the costs of going to college have become neither moral nor sustainable. This year, for the first year that I know of, at least one good private college, and I know I'm not going to name it, but has crossed $60,000 a year for tuition, room, and board, and associated fees. And that's, in my opinion, ridiculous. But let me just tell you, the rest of the, say, top 50 are all clustered in the next $2,000 or $3,000 below that. It's not like everybody's at 40 and this one outlier is at 60. The rest of them are at 56, 57, something like that. So it's effectively around $60,000 to go to one of these schools, and they're chasing their own tail. They have what they themselves refer to internally as, some of you know this, as a discount rate. So they charge this high price, and then they try to provide financial aid to, in some cases, most of the students. Some of that financial aid, as you know, is in the form of loans, and you can't go to a website or a newspaper without reading horror stories about the amount of debt that students are coming out of school with. That's also, I think, immoral and unsustainable. So something has to be done about it. And it's not a question of if we're going to disrupt higher education, it's happening. And it's not happening in a small way. It's a tsunami, and the tsunami began to appear in full force last year, in 2012. There is nothing new about doing classes or courses online or taking education off the campus. It's been going on for decades. There's been a lot of success. There's also been a lot of kind of low grade, not very well done education that way. But what is new is that it is a, I mean, I don't mean to use a cliche, but it's the best term I can think of. It is a tsunami. Hennessy uses that term, and I think he's right. And the other new thing is it's hitting famous, elite, wealthy schools. It's not just the kind of more vocationally oriented or schools that the established institutions look down their nose at. It's happening to them. It's hitting them. And so there is no choice. If you are running a college, if you are on the board of trustees, or you're in the administration, or you're running the faculty, you can't ignore it. You have no choice. You're either going to be swamped by the tsunami, or you're going to figure out a way to ride it. And really, and that's from the institutional point of view. From the student and family point of view, all across our country, and I don't know about the rest of the world, but all across our country at least, families are sitting down, and instead of what traditionally families did, I know my parents did, which was to stretch every resource, go into debt, do whatever they could to get their kids into a school that was the best school they could qualify for. These families are saying, look, we just can't afford it. Just can't afford it. And by the way, what's the relationship of what you're learning to what's going to happen in the workforce? Now, that does not mean, I want to be very clear about this. I am just a journalist. I'm not a professor and educator, but I do not believe that we ought to turn our higher education system into purely a job training system. That would be a big mistake. I think people have to learn critical thinking. I think it's a good thing to learn literature. It's a good thing to have at least a 101 level understanding of art, even if you're not going to go into art. I think it's a good thing to understand basic economics and political science and biology and physics and that stuff. The STEM movement is a great movement. We do need engineers, but you know what? We also need people who are literate. We also need people who can write, including, by the way, the engineers. They need to know how to write. I deal with engineers all the time, brilliant people sometimes. Sometimes they have a little trouble communicating with us mortals, and college can help with that. So the colleges how are the colleges reacting? Well, you can't generalize. There are individual administrators, college presidents, and faculty members who are really progressive, who are taking their own classes online, who are organizing even before the whole of the institution moves. They're doing some things. But by and large, they're reacting the way the music industry reacted, newspapers reacted and are still reacting, Hollywood is reacting. Every established and by the way, largely successful, well-regarded institution in society resists disruption. And I know disruption is an overused term, but this is disruption. This is, as Jinny said, this is really about changing the way the place is organized, changing all the power centers, putting the power in the hands of the consumer, which has been the hallmark of consumer technology, which I cover with my colleague Katie Barrett, who's sitting out in the audience. And we write from a consumer point of view. That was in some ways when I did have to argue with my editor 20 years ago about starting my column. A big part of it was I wanted to write the column from the point of view of the non-techie consumer. That's where the power lies. And I think in terms of colleges, as Jinny said, the power is shifting to the consumer of education, to the student. So what are the colleges doing? They're doing what human beings and institutions do. They're resisting in a lot of cases. How do I know this? Well, I was on this task force. And, Brandeis has some great people. So do all the other colleges that are going through this. I'm not knocking any college. There's lots of great people and lots of great colleges. But we went through just what you would expect if you were just blindfolded and had to, kind of recite what you thought would happen. We went through faculty resisting it on grounds that this is not the way you educate people. We had people making serious and thoughtful objections, like there's real value in being physically on campus. There's real value in actually seeing professors and being able to socialize with them and network with students and get the flavor and the feeling of the campus. And I'm not talking about going binge drinking and football, although football has value. Sports have value too, but I believe this, and particularly Brandeis, for those who don't know, is a full-scale university that awards many graduate degrees and has research labs and all that, but it's relatively small. It's got about 5,000 students. And so it's a very interesting flavor because you get to know people, and there's a lot of value in the campus experience. And so that was a thoughtful objection. We had less thoughtful objections. We had, the IT department decided this should be an IT function. That's just another thing we're doing with it's computery, so we'll run it. Well, no, there were a couple of us on the committee who had some tech understanding, and we just said, look, this is about transforming the whole institution. It's not about adding some headcount and some servers to the IT department. So that was the kind of, we had that kind of argument. It's tough. Making these changes is not trivial, and there are some thoughtful objections. On the other side, I think the tech, and this is always true, the tech industry, it's a wonderful industry to cover. The tech and internet and digital industries, they're wonderful industries to cover, filled with really interesting people to talk to. Why? Because they believe in unlimited possibility. They're, even at the worst moments of recession and decline in the economy, you always had an upbeat feeling out of tech. They always believed, all right, maybe I'll fail in this venture, but I'm going to pick myself up and I'll do well in the next venture. It's a great example of the free market and capitalism, and I love it. But it leads to a little bit of hype. It leads to a little bit of oversimplification. And those guys think it's a silver bullet. We can just solve this. We'll just put all the classes online and it all gets solved. And I think that's a mistake too. I think there is a place. We have to find a balance between being on campus and doing it online, not just do it. Some people, maybe it would be all right to do it all online, but I think to get the best education, there's probably some balance required, and that's one of the issues we argued about quite a bit on our task force. I think the different kinds of online education are just beginning to shake out. What's the flavor of the month? It's MOOCs. Jinny mentioned it. You're going to hear a lot about it, I'm sure, today. But there are smaller seminars. There's other ways of doing it. My college, Brandeis, joined with, I think it's a total of 10 other really good schools like Northwestern and Duke and WashU and Notre Dame and Emory to create a consortium called Semester Online recently. And what that's really doing is saying, now if you go to one of them, you can study abroad or take a semester off physically living on the campus, save some money doing that. You can still take classes, but not only at your college, you can choose from the curriculum at all these fine colleges. You're no longer constrained by the fact that you can't just drive over to the other college and take the class. So it's an interesting step. It's not as radical as some other things, but it's a good way to begin, I think, and it adds real value. I don't think we should just talk about MOOCs as being the whole thing. The big problem, and Salman Khan talked about this when I interviewed him, was I think there's 2 or 3 big problems, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. One I already mentioned. I think figuring out a way to replace the value of the time on campus. Secondly, the whole question of credentials. Jinny mentioned badges. A badge is not a college course credit. We could change the whole system in America and throw out the idea of credits and college degrees, and I think we will have big change in that, but you want rigor. You want rigor in that. I have an honorary doctorate. I don't have 10 Oscars, but I have an honorary doctorate. It looks lovely on my wall. It means nothing, okay? It was very nice of the university that gave it to me to do it, but it means nothing. The credentialing system, the credit system, when an employer goes to hire you, the need for them to have something to refer back to say, okay, they went to the University of Nevada at Las Vegas and they got this degree. We need something. If we're not going to do that, we need something to replace that, and we need some kind of independent clearinghouse to do that. Salman Khan talked about that. We don't have that yet. We're a long way from that. There's going to be a lot of argument. The government will probably get involved. I mean, it's going to be a very involved thing. And then the third thing is the business model. I see Joel Klein over there, and I know he thinks a lot about, he's already a giant in improving education for all his work he did in the New York public schools. But he's got to figure out both how can we improve education and bring it to more people, but also how can you make money doing it? And how can you have a fair price for the students and also somehow make money? He probably knows the answer. I don't know the answer, but it's a problem. So I guess I would just like to leave you with the thought that it's real, it's happening, there's no avoiding it, and on the other side, there's no silver bullet yet. There'll never be a silver bullet, and the answers are just being worked out. We're really even though people have been doing online education for decades, the big disruption, the big wave is in its first inning. So thanks very much. Thank you.
All right. So I know you have to run. I'm going to, on behalf of the audience, because we're going to touch on a lot of the topics.
Well, I'll take some Q&A,
okay.
though, too.
Let me come to one question very
Yeah.
quickly. For all of us who sat or slept through introductory economics,
Yeah.
our basic understanding is some increment of technology generates productivity. The product or service is better and potentially costs less, and best of all, it not only is much better, greatly improved, but also costs less. You write a column about personal productivity. Many of us can't live the lives we lead today without the productivity that technology provides us personally. Every industry except higher education or education has seen some productivity, because this is really the conversation about costs. We spend right now about 6 to 8% of total campus budgets on IT, people, personnel, hardware, software. We've not seen the productivity on the instructional side. Did your Brandeis experience give you any insights to that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, you know, look, one of the great tensions of, if you start out with the premise that you're going to try to not run a mill, just a degree mill, but an actual good educational institution. It could be a scientifically oriented one, it could be a liberal arts one, I don't care what it is. You're going to try to actually teach these students how to think. You're going to teach them some of the accumulated learning of the ages, and you're going to teach them some of the cutting edge stuff and set them loose in the world to do great things. And that's the premise of a really good, whether it's a middle school or a college, that's the premise of an educational institution. I don't think you can measure it exactly entirely as a business. I honestly don't. Look, I took a lot of crap on the board of Brandeis and on this committee for being too business-oriented, being a Philistine. And I wasn't the only one. A number of us did. Which is kind of hilarious for anybody who knows my ability with money. But so it is a business, and you have to think about it a little bit that way. And yes, things like productivity do matter, but it's not. There are intangible things that can't be put on a spreadsheet that a college delivers, and it might cost something and not yield, you know, the return on investment in dollars that you want. The return on investment is spread out over the life of the students you release into the world, to some extent. I'm not buying that as an overall argument. I agree with you. I get your point. Believe me, I shed a lot of blood arguing the kinds of things you did. I mean, look, you know, tenure is a great productivity issue if you really want to get into it. I mean, why are we awarding lifetime jobs to people? Well, you know, I understood why we were doing it when it started, but why are we still doing it? It's an interesting question. If you replace tenure, do you have to really raise the salaries? Because a lot of professors don't make much money, to be honest. You know, the ones with grants and side businesses, they make a lot of money. Some of them are millionaires, but a lot of professors don't make much money. So if you don't give them a chance to get on a tenure track, you may have to pay them more. I mean, none of these are easy questions.
A lot of moving parts.
So I agree with you that colleges need to be more productive. But I would also say, just as I did about the big disruption, that we should be wary of the idea that it's an exact analog for business or there's a magic bullet. This is a delicate thing. It's of high value. It's of high value to America and the world. You all know this. People come from all over the world to go to our colleges. It's an incredible asset for us to have. We need to change it. It is changing. There is this tsunami, but we better be careful about it too.
Okay. We're going to get some audience questions, and then I know you've got to run. So I think there's a microphone floating around. Bobby Camille has a microphone. If you have a question for Mr. Mossberg, we've got time for one or two. Please identify yourself, your name and your organizational affiliation, so we can make some inappropriate inferences about you as you ask your question. Sir, you are?
Mandeep Dhillon. I'm in the educational technology space. I started a company for children that was acquired by Disney last year. And so looking at how this transition is happening, we're talking about higher ed, but it goes all the way down. There's a structural problem of cost, you mentioned it, Walt, in the educational system. It's showing up in universities. It's also showing up in secondary schools where the cost of educating our kids is increasing, and we don't really know what's causing it or how to control it. This is also hitting this wave of technology, where the ability to get higher quality technology at lower cost is coming at the same time. These are two conflating waves, right? Because they actually have nothing to do with each other, but they both happen to be happening at the same time.
I'm going to be rude. I'm going to ask you to get to the question quickly.
The question is, do we believe these conflating waves will make the change in technology easier or more difficult?
Well, I think they can make the change easier, but I think every institution is going to handle it differently, and for some of them, it's going to be more difficult. I'll just tell you a quick anecdote. When I joined the board at Brandeis, because I knew something about technology, the president of the institution said, "Would you mind having lunch with our IT people?" I said, "No, I'll have lunch with the IT people." So I had lunch with the IT people, and here's what they told me. It was fascinating. They said, 10 years ago, we needed one IP address for each student. They came with usually a desktop computer and we had a wired connection in the dorm room, and we gave them an IP address, and that's what we did. Now, the typical student has 3, and an increasing number have 4. They have a laptop, they have a tablet, they have a smartphone, and a smaller group also have a game console. And all those things need an IP address. So, you know, there's a cost to putting in the technology infrastructure. Companies like, I see a big blue sign there that says to you, and that happens to be the company that is operating this consortium that Brandeis has just joined with Duke and Northwestern and Emory and the others. But you know, maybe they are supplying some of the, helping with some of the cost, charging, of course, but you know, providing some of the infrastructure. But the colleges have to have some of their own. School districts, which are totally strapped for cash and are way behind on technology, in most cases have to do it. So I can't give you a flat answer. I mean, you know, the possibilities for it to be a cooperating, supportive thing are there, and the possibilities for it to be a kind of clashing, messy thing are also there.
One last question.
Yeah,
And again, you are?
Devin Fiddler, the Institute for the Future. We're a nonprofit based in Silicon Valley that looks at emerging issues and technologies. I'm curious, given your background in journalism, what parallels you see, and if there's any advice that, you know, kind of as somebody from an industry that's experienced this kind of digital disruption over the last decade, what does higher ed have to learn from that?
Well, the newspaper industry has made a lot of mistakes, but there are real similarities. I mean, you can snicker if you want, but certainly the elite or better quality newspapers and the journalists in them and the editors and a lot of the publishers felt they were doing, yes, the publishers were making money, but they felt that they were also providing a public service. This is very much in the water at universities, too. They felt they were not just another business, but something that was important for democracy, and you've heard all that stuff. And there is some truth to that. You know, some of it's bullshit, some of it's true, like most things in life. And so that made change harder. That made change harder. And that's one of the reasons change is going to be harder for higher education, particularly the institutions that feel like they're an important part of the fabric of the country. And not just a business, not just a shoe store or something. So but I'll tell you, one lesson is you have to have multiple revenue streams. I think one of the big mistakes was that newspapers made. A lot of newspapers gave away their journalism for free. Really good journalism costs money. Really good education costs money. I don't care if you deliver it online; it costs money. Really good books, textbooks or other kinds of books cost money. I think digital textbooks still cost more than they should. We can have an argument. I know there are some publishers here. Could have an argument about that if I wasn't fleeing, so I won't get into the argument. But
we're actually going to get into that argument later.
Yeah, but the point is, newspapers learned that you can't give it away free, and now more recently, a lot of them have come to realize that you can't just do it with one revenue stream. In the case of newspapers, advertising. It's not exactly analogous to what a university would have. I'm not saying universities can't have some advertising, but it's a different business. I feel fortunate, and I certainly wasn't the person that made this decision, but I feel fortunate that the Journal was the first of the quality, national newspapers to say, we're going to charge something. And for a long time, people say, well, the Journal can get away with it because it's a business paper, blah, blah, whatever. Now you see everybody trying to figure out a way to charge for journalism. So you have to charge for giving away something of value. It's a basic principle of capitalism, I think. And I think you have to have multiple revenue streams. And I didn't get to this, but I think one of the things that I learned on my task force was that this can be a good productivity and business move, as well as an important and necessary way of cutting the cost of college and of delivering great education to more people. And here's why. You can take non-enrolled students, non-matriculating students, and charge them per course and give them a credit. or at least until we get some other kind of accreditation system. So you could charge them, and that's another revenue stream for the college. You also, if you can take the student population, let's say the undergraduate population of the University of Delaware, and have some proportion of them off somewhere doing something else, doing actual work in the field or studying abroad, but using online to continue to complete their course requirements, they're not living in the dorms that semester. They're not eating at the dining halls that semester. So you can fill those dorms up with additional students. So there's all kinds of revenue streams that can get generated. The online can generate its own revenue stream, but it frees up the physical campus stuff to generate more revenue. Again, everything has to be done delicately and in a balance, but you can do it. So that's a lesson from the newspaper industry, I would say.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.